Your rent went up 20% this year, and so did your neighbors, and so did the buildings across the street, all on the same day. You thought it was just inflation, bad luck, the market. But it wasn't the market. It was a machine. This story starts, like many do, after a crisis. The 2008 financial collapse decimated the housing market. Banks foreclosed on millions of homes. The American dream turned into a fire sale, and into that chaos walked private equity. Wall Street giants saw an opportunity not just to buy property, but to fundamentally change how it was managed. They bought up thousands of apartment buildings, consolidating the fragmented world of mom-and-pop landlords into massive corporate portfolios. Greystar, the largest property manager in the U.S., now oversees more than 725,000 apartment units alone. But managing that much real estate is complex. How do you set the rent for tens of thousands of apartments at once? How do you squeeze every last drop of profit from each one? In the old days, a building manager would walk the property. They'd look at the empty units. They might feel pressure to lower the price to get someone in the door fast. A paying tenant is better than an empty apartment. That was the old way. That was the human way. Private equity found a better way. They found a digital one. They called it YieldStar. It was a sophisticated piece of software from a Texas tech company called RealPage, and its promise was simple: to maximize your revenue by taking the human element out of pricing. RealPage's own executives described the old system, the human system, as being held back by a tendency toward way too much empathy. The algorithm had no empathy. It had one goal: profit. Here's how it worked. Landlords, these massive new corporate landlords, would feed YieldStar their internal confidential data every single day. What they were charging for a one-bedroom, how many units were vacant, what their renewal rates were, everything. The algorithm would take this private data from supposed competitors, combine it, and then spit out a recommendation for what price they should set. And landlords listened. They had to. Some corporate policies mandated that managers accept the algorithm's price at least 80% to 90% of the time. The human override, the person who might offer a loyal tenant a small break, was eliminated from the system, replaced by a cold, calculated number. The results were immediate and brutal. RealPage itself proudly advertised that its software delivered a revenue lift of 3% to 7% for its clients. That isn't 3% to 7% from a new gym or better maintenance. That's 3% to 7% coming directly out of tenants' pockets. The algorithm learned something that individual landlords often resisted. It learned that it was more profitable to leave an apartment vacant for a month to get a higher rent later than to fill it quickly at a lower price. The software calculated that the long-term gain from pushing the entire market's price floor up was worth the short-term pain of a few empty units. Your search for an affordable apartment became harder, not because there were no apartments available, but because a machine decided it was better to keep them empty. This created a strange new reality in cities across America. An investigation by ProPublica discovered that in one dense downtown Seattle neighborhood, a staggering 70% of apartments were overseen by just 10 property managers. Every single one of them used RealPage's pricing software. When one building raised its rent, the algorithm saw it. It told the other buildings to raise their rents too. They weren't competing against each other anymore. They were collaborating. They were a team, and the algorithm was their coach. They were effectively a cartel, with an AI as the middleman. Think about what that means. The core principle of a free market is competition. If one landlord charges too much, you can go to the competitor across the street who will offer you a better deal. But what happens when the landlord across the street is getting their price from the exact same secret algorithm? There is no better deal. There is no alternative. There is only the price. The price just goes up. For years, this operated in the shadows. Tenants just saw their rent checks getting bigger. They blamed the economy. They blamed their city's popularity. They had no idea that their financial squeeze was being engineered by a line of code in an office in Richardson, Texas. They couldn't see the data-sharing agreements that turned their landlords from rivals into partners in a shared strategy of price elevation. Then, the story broke. Journalists exposed the system. They found the internal documents. They talked to the executives. They laid out the entire scheme for the world to see. The secret was out. An algorithm was fixing the price of rent for millions of Americans, and the government noticed. The Department of Justice launched a massive antitrust investigation. They didn't just target RealPage. They targeted the giants who used its software. Graystar, Mid-America Apartment Communities, Trammell Crow. The lawsuit argues that these companies formed a digital cartel, replacing free market competition with a centralized price-fixing conspiracy. The algorithm wasn't just a recommendation tool. It was the instrument of an illegal agreement to inflate rents artificially. This wasn't just about one company or one piece of software. It represented a terrifying new frontier. Wall Street's financial engineering had merged with Silicon Valley's algorithmic power, and the target was one of our most basic human needs: shelter. The logic of the stock market was now being applied to your home. Optimize, maximize, disregard the human cost. We are now living in the fallout of that union. The lawsuits are working their way through the courts, a slow, grinding process that could take years. The legal battle will hinge on a single crucial question. Did these landlords agree to collude? Or did they all just happen to independently subscribe to a very persuasive piece of software? RealPage argues it's the latter. They claim their software simply provides smart suggestions in a competitive market. But prosecutors and tenant advocates argue that sharing non-public forward-looking price data with your competitors is the agreement. The software wasn't just a tool. It was the meeting room where the collusion happened. The exposure of YieldStar peeled back a layer of our economy and revealed something ugly underneath. It showed us that when we talk about the market, we might not be talking about a natural force of supply and demand. We might be talking about a handful of powerful players using technology to bend that market to their will. The algorithm wasn't predicting the future of rent prices. It was creating it. The secret is out. We now know that your rent isn't just set by your landlord. It may be set by an invisible algorithmic landlord that manages not just your building but your entire neighborhood. It's a landlord that feels no empathy, that sees no community, that has no loyalty to a long-term tenant. It sees only a number on a spreadsheet, and its one and only command is to make that number go up. The fight for affordable housing isn't just against rising construction costs or city zoning laws anymore. It's a fight against the code. This story is far from over, and its outcome will define the balance of power between tenants and landlords for a generation. The fight is happening right now, in courtrooms and in Congress, so subscribe and stay with us. We'll follow the money and the code to show you the forces that are truly shaping your financial life. And I want to know what you're seeing. Leave a comment below and tell me if you've seen coordinated steep rent hikes in your city. It's time we all started comparing notes.